Welcome. This is Sandra Hess, founder of DTC Wine Workshops Consulting Agency, and I have the pleasure of recording episode number 11 in our DTC Wine Case Study series featuring Talley Vineyards and Community Benchmark Software Solutions. Thank you so much for taking time out as we dig into the true ROI of a winery brand using benchmarking software to grow the bottom line and to retain loyal customers.
Hello, my name is Alyssa. I'm the sales manager for the direct-to-consumer department here at Talley Vineyards. We are a family winery in the Arroyo Grande Valley, just south of San Luis Obispo. We've been farming in the area since the 1940s and making wines since 96. And I'm very excited to be here today, so thank you for having me.
Thank you.
I'm obviously the founder of Community Benchmark. I'm up here in a small ranch in Mendocino County, where I moved after 8 years of founding and growing a different software project on the East Coast. It's a big change, and moved out here, took a couple years off, fell in love with wine, wanted to get involved with my community. So I went around and interviewed a lot of the winery owners, figured out how I could help, and that's the basic story of how Community Benchmark got started. What I realized is that, tasting rooms are absolutely the lifeblood of where it all starts for most wineries in terms of your sales. Probably about 2 years ago here in Mendocino, and then about a year ago, we launched into, not even actually, we launched into several other regions in Napa, San Luis Obispo, Paso Robles, Santa Cruz, Livermore. And so now we have about 130 wineries on the platform. And 2 years later, here we are.
Well, thank you again for your time today as we explore the true ROI of using the Community Benchmark software solution. And so my first question, John, your vision for the software platform, what was the solution that you wanted to provide winery teams?
The number one thing is what to focus on. I know that, like a lot of small businesses, but especially in the wine industry, there's a lot of things you could do every day. There's a few people wearing a few different hats, but the question is, every day, every week, every month, where should I spend my energy? What's going to be the biggest opportunity for us to improve what we're doing? And I think that was the number one question that I wanted to answer very clearly for wineries by getting all of their key metrics into one single dashboard, setting it next to their exact peers. It becomes really obvious what the opportunity is for each winery. And on top of that, how big that opportunity really is. And that helps you as a manager or owner focus on a day-to-day, month-to-month basis where you should be applying your most of your energy.
Well, thank you, John. And Alyssa, over to you. Why did Talley Vineyards decide to use the Community Benchmark software solution? organization?
Initially, I was most excited by the prospect of seeing numbers that were just from our neighbors. We're a very small wine region, and we typically are lumped in with some of the larger wine regions nearby, such as Santa Barbara or Paso Robles. And while they're certainly wonderful company to keep, it didn't make me feel like I was getting a real accurate representation of where we stood in proximity to our neighbors and what the wineries closest to us were doing. So this was a great opportunity, and I feel like we're seeing some really authentic numbers that are really helping us guide decisions.
Mm-hmm. So let's get into how then Community Benchmark is helping winery teams better understand how they're performing against their peers within their respective region. And so, Alyssa, can you share with us examples of how your team is using the tool to do just this?
Sure. One example from when we very first started using Community Benchmark was in February. We noticed at the end of the month that our visitor count had dropped pretty significantly since the previous year. And I initially thought, oh my gosh, I have to get out to all of the neighboring tasting rooms and talk to them about what's going on and make sure that they're referring people our way. And then I stopped for a moment and thought, let's work smarter instead of harder. I have that information at my fingertips. And when I dug into the Community Benchmark numbers, I realized that it was actually through our whole wine region that the visitor count had dropped. So it wasn't going to benefit me to spend time running around to all the other tasting rooms, encouraging them to send us visitors. They didn't have the visitors to send us. What we did instead was really focused on a business-to-business push, and we developed some relationships with area hotels. We're sending people to pour in the lobby at check-in a few times a month. They're talking about our wine region, giving people directions and a little background on what we're doing out here, and a great taste of wine. It's not costing us any more than just a few bottles of wine of staff time, and we're seeing a really great return on it. And with time being such a precious commodity, I'm so glad that I looked at those numbers before making the decisions.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that excellent example. And John, over to you with the same question. I mean, how are you seeing winery teams leveraging the tool, and what are some of the key questions that they need to be asking when using the software?
Well, I think it comes down to back to what I was mentioning earlier. Where should we focus our energy? Because you can't do everything. And what we found is that with looking at the dashboard, having some communication with your staff, it becomes really obvious in terms of, which metric is below or above average. Not only that, but which direction are we moving? And so it's two things. It's where do you stand apples to apples? But the second thing is really the growth rate and which direction are you headed? And that's always what a winery is trying to answer is, what are we doing well? What could we improve? And where should we dive in and tackle and really get after it? So I think the wineries are finding that when you get all of the right information in one screen next to your peers, it becomes pretty clear what exactly they should focus on. And also what we find is a lot of times it's not what they thought by looking at their own numbers. You can look at your own numbers all day long and see certain trends and that sort of thing. But when you overlay that very same data for the same time period against your peers in your region, you often realize some very different things than you may have realized just by looking at your own numbers.
One area where I felt like I was a little bit in the dark as to how we compared to our neighbors has always been with our wine club numbers. I feel like it's an area that people tend to be a little reticent to share. And so now having a dashboard where I can compare our wine club statistics to the community without anybody needing to say out loud in a room full of people what their numbers are has been really useful. And, I noticed when I looked at our active membership, we were above the community, and that felt really good. And when I looked at our shipment revenue, we were doing really well next to our community, and that felt great too. But when I realized that our actual revenue per member is lower than our neighbors, that was really informative, and I felt like it was a great example of some low-hanging fruit, that it's hard to think of increasing prices on a wine club shipment and wondering about, am I going to lose more members than it's worth to bring in that added cash on each shipment. But seeing that our region really does support some higher priced shipments, that people are willing to pay for it, made me realize that we have a real opportunity there. And so we're making some decisions for the future based on that information.
Wonderful example. Thank you so much, Alyssa. So John, before I get into the True ROI discussion, let's hear from you about how new clients get set up.
It's 2 phone calls, and the first one is to sort out how to get some of your historical data into the system so that we get immediate value. And the second phone call is an initial analysis of your numbers compared to your peers. And again, boiling that down into what are the 1 or 2 key opportunities for you and your team to focus on. And that's sometimes of a conversation because usually wineries have an idea coming into it. I'm looking at the numbers, and by comparing the real data to back up what they're actually doing or not doing in their tasting room, through that conversation, there usually come out a couple key items to focus on moving forward, so that you know that you're working on the right program, basically.
Mm-hmm. So as far as the initial data upload and getting set up, do you have a template that you hand off to winery teams?
Absolutely. It's all in the software. And so, you set you up with an account, and we have very clear definitions. It's almost like a spreadsheet in the software. And then we also have an option for emailing reports as well, so that if there's a way that we can set it up with your point of sale to make it a little bit more automatic, we can do that as well.
Thank you, John. Now let's get into the true return on investment of Talley Vineyards using the community benchmark software solution. So Alyssa, how long has your team been using the software?
We have been using the software since January. We did take the time to work with a community benchmark to get our 2017 numbers in as well. So that way we're able to compare ourselves month to month, but also to last year as well.
Excellent. So you've got a solid 6+ months under your belt now. And so,
Correct.
John, what does the upfront cost look like, the one-time setup versus the annual commitment?
Right. So the one-time setup fee for the historical data, the data upload, the initial analysis is $299, and then your first year of annual subscription to your regional benchmark is $420.
Right.
And I think as our membership grows and as the software evolves, we definitely are aggressively coming up with options to get even more specific than your region and actually have some as well. So it starts at $420 and we go from there.
You know, Talley Vineyards year one, $720 to get going. Year two, reoccurring $420 year over year. And so let's talk about how you've seen return on investment, Alyssa. Can you share with us some examples?
Sure. Just to go back to my previous example about building the relationship with area hotels, we've found that the people that have come in from that outreach have really exceeded our expectations with both club conversion and average order value. So we're seeing about a 10% club conversion from those visitors and an average order value of about $109 each, which is quite a bit above the average in our area. And so we really only needed a few of those visitors to pay for this program.
Excellent. So just with that one initiative, I'm hearing that you were able to pay for the first year of the community benchmark solution just by simply digging into the problem in February over year. It's a wonderful return on investment. When it comes to additional forms of ROI and what this means to you as a manager and what this means to your DTC frontline staff, can you share with us some ROI points there?
Sure. It's been a really great tool just to be able to educate our tasting room staff with where our gaps are, but also with what they're doing well. For example, we had a really great month in June in the tasting room, and we could show them the bottom line and congratulate them, and they certainly felt good about that. But I was also able to tell them that our June was 143% of our community's numbers. So that felt great. That's really inspiring and really motivating for our staff. And, this is our only way to learn that kind of information.
And you know what? That is such good news to hear. And we haven't often had these type of tools for both stakeholders to reference in terms of peer review and benchmark review down to the region, but also for the frontline staff, knowing how that particular team is ranking against the peer sets. And so thank you so much for your time today, Alyssa, as we look at the true ROI of using community benchmark software. As we wrap up case study number 11, I would love to get just some final words of wisdom from each of you. And let's start with John.
Well, I guess the first thing I would say is know where you stand in terms of again, what I was saying before, what is your thing to focus on? Which way are you growing? Is for the tasting room, for example, is your issue with traffic, or is it what you're doing with that traffic? And I think being able to focus in on a couple things each quarter is what's going to be your tools for success. Instead of trying to do everything, let's just move one needle in the right direction. And if we can do that, then you can move on to the next needle. But I really think that focusing in on the right opportunity with your tasting room is the way to go. And you do that by engaging with your numbers and finding out where, as Alyssa said, where your gaps are. And then, of course, those become your opportunities.
Thank you, John, again, for your time today and all that you are doing for the wine industry. This has been a missing component in the direct-to-consumer channel for many years. Alyssa, any winery, any DTC manager today looking to get set up with the community benchmark software, what do you advise?
I would advise them to use this to know your numbers. We know that we pay attention to the numbers that we know. That's where we make our our focus. And this is a really simple way to look at the key metrics for your tasting room and for your wine club.
Excellent. Thanks so much for taking time out there. Looking forward to
Thank you.
my next visit down your way and some delicious Talley Vineyard wine.
Cool.
Sandra Hess, founder of DTC Wine Workshops, excited to wrap up case study number 11 in the DTC Wine Case Study series that you can find at the dtcwineworkshops.com website. To those of you joining us today, we hope that you found some great value in your time with us, and cheers to you all.